Well, hello there, Comp 1, Section 14. This is a Blizzard edition of Comp 1 for your first video of the week. We could also call it an Ash Wednesday edition of the week. Kind of a different week for me. I don't know. I hope you're doing okay. I am too. I'm doing wonderfully. Just a little out of my routine this week. We had no school Monday and workshop yesterday, which I'm going to admit on the internet in public, I thought that our workshop for the college that would help us prepare for the coming of the Higher Learning Commission to accreditate us this spring, I thought that that might be on the dull side. I cannot believe how much fun I had. I laughed so many times and had such a blast hanging out with my colleagues and running around and trying to figure out how we're going to get ready for these people as they come up the sidewalk with their sunglasses and attaché cases. And I kind of forgot. Part of my social life was my parish. The other part of it is CLC. I got one or two friends. Super popular guy with hardly any friends. And I just love my colleagues. They are so brilliant and so hilarious and such serious educators. I'm just continue to be really happy that I teach at Central Lakes College and in the Mid-State system. And I'm going to do it as long as I can. And the weather is on top of that. I've already addressed you. I know you read carefully in my posting, and then reread it for deeper meaning. We're in a blizzard zone down here in Stearns County, so my dean gave me permission to teach from home. So I've had a long day at this computer, a good day, and my students were glad I made the effort. But it was kind of sad not to be live today where I prefer, and also I'm not going to let it bum me out. I had to cancel my poetry reading for this week, but I'll reschedule. The good news, the really good news, is that when my podium is done, it's finished and it's ready to go. Behold, look at this thing. It's an absolute work of art. You can see Ryan Cotter standing there. He's the carpenter, the furniture maker actually, that did the bulk of the work. And it's a work of art. It is. I cannot overstate how excited I am about that. And the college is going to, James McCardle, our buildings guy, facilities guy, he's going to get me a beautiful trailer next week that's got a cover on it so I can safely spirit it up to the college and get it tucked away in the closet that's waiting for it with my half-ton. And I hope you come and see it at one of my poetry readings this spring. So kind of a different week. My medallion hunt starts next week, and let's have some kind of a class today. I've been telling anyone who will listen, basically all my students all day long, that in my long day in poetry, in my life in poetry, twice I've hosted poets who, on Ash Wednesday. I hosted Nick Flynn a few years ago for Verse Like Water on Ash Wednesday, and way back in around 2005, maybe 2006, I hosted Michael Dennis Browne, who used to be the chair of the English department at the University of Minnesota, originally from England. A beautiful poet. And I'll spare you Nick Flynn, because we got to get going here. But I'd like us to get started with a little bit of music today. And that music is going to come from a libretto that Michael Dennis Browne wrote with the man that he's sitting with here. Michael's on the right, and on the left, we have another Minnesotan, Stephen Paulus. Wrote the music for this. Michael Dennis Browne wrote the words, and it's really beautiful. And it makes me think about when I was young. When I was a kid, I hated choral music. What was the matter with me? I just love it now. I can't get enough. And let's start with a little bit of music today, which is the same thing as poetry.
I
What was I going to say about that? I had a thought about that. I wish I had my score, the sheet music that Michael Dennis Browne signed. And I remember when he read at my old high school for my old Project Logos series. It was a hard reading because his sister had attempted suicide the night before, his older sister, back in England. And I told him, you do not have to do this reading. You do not have to do this reading. It's not necessary. We can reschedule. But he did it anyway. And I'm grateful to him for that. What I'd like to talk to you about for a while today, I was going to mention, well, no, that can keep. We've been talking about style a lot for a while now. And we're also running a thread of argumentation. And I'm going to take 2 essays from you and your sister class, the Staples class, not 2 more, 1 more like we agreed. 2 essays total and the rest journal entries. And I will, it's going to be a paper of persuasion. You're going to make an argument. You're going to make a claim and you're going to back it up and you're going to try to convince me of something. And before I've got more things to tell you about style, but we do got to talk about persuasion here in the next few lessons that we have. And this might be a lighter week video-wise because I'm only seeing my Staples kids twice. I think I mentioned that. They had parent-teacher conferences yesterday, but we'll see. We'll just see how it goes, and I've got to keep this thing going. So what I want to talk to you about for a little while today is something called contrastive rhetoric. And that is an important thing to understand. I read a book about it back in the 1980s in my first incarnation as a graduate student. And students, I think, appreciate thinking in this way. And it's not that complicated. What it is, contrastive rhetoric, is the study and the consideration of ways that people behave when they argue, when they speak, when they invent, when they create, and in its relationship to the language that their consciousness is wired with. And I'll spare you the crap joke that I told my Staples kids about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. I got to quit telling that joke, but it's just basic. In the West, and I could take this further, but if you're Western, if you think in a Western pattern, if you're from the United States, if you were from Canada, if you're from Western Europe, which is sadly destroying itself, with the exception of Spain, our discourse basically looks like this. It goes in a line, a direct line. Western rhetoric is characterized by being very direct. And as Aristotle put it, the beginning of Western civilization starts with that guy, for me anyway. It was Aristotle who definitively articulated for the very first time that everything in the world has a beginning and a middle and an end. So not only do we have a direct pattern when we speak, but it's a 3-part deal. And I love thinking in that way. And meanwhile, if you're from the other side of the world, and I know this because I taught at an international high school for 19 years, there were kids from all over the world there. There were kids from Austria, kids from China, from Asia, from China, Japan, South Korea. It was like I didn't even have to travel in those days. I don't travel much anyway, but the world came to me. And I can tell you that if you are from the other side of the world, if your head is Asian, your consciousness is Asian, your discourse actually looks like this. It goes in a circle. They write and they behave and they argue in a pattern that can only be called circular. And they have a 4-part discourse. And what's so fascinating, I've seen this for so many years. At CLC, not so much. But I used to have always had students from the other side of the world in my class, and things are kind of the opposite there. And I've been telling this story for a long time. I'm not tired of it. But I do wish that I had a paper that a young Vietnamese kid wrote for me way back in the early 90s. I can remember him vividly. His name was Ton Tran. I had the idea, I think I was told somewhere, that he went off and became wealthy, running a toy company that made toys for superheroes, modeled on superheroes. Well, he gave me this paper that had 4 paragraphs. And at first I didn't even really know what he was telling me. He had a paragraph that was about a rug. he had a paragraph that was about a clock that his grandmother in South Vietnam had given him. And he also had a paragraph about a tennis racket. And when he got to the very end, only in the last sentence did he write, "My God, am I homesick. I am so homesick." So what I'm trying to demonstrate with this circular thing is, if Tan were Western, this probably looks pretty stupid. I can't help it. I'm online. This does look stupid. If Tom were a Western student, he would have made the claim and then wrote away from it. But he's Asian, right? He's Vietnamese, so he's writing towards the claim. And it's a circle. He's telling you all the ways that, the reasons that he's homesick, sort of putting the eye on the dragon at the very end. Now, I don't know if this is true, but I read it on the internet, in the book, and it's simple. I remember when my boys, especially my younger boy, when Will would draw dragons, he loved drawing monsters and fierce dragons. He's a Western kid, so he'd always start with the head and end with the tail. I read that in China, if you tell a little boy or girl to draw a dragon, they start with the tail. And I think that's absolutely fascinating, putting the eye on the dragon at the end. And it reminds me, Tan and I told Tan a story once about how I got my family's, it was a 17-foot long 1973 Ford Country Squire with crap paneling on the side. And I remember getting in that car right after I got my license, and I was in the garage and I hit the button, but the chain didn't catch. The door didn't go up, and I hit the gas and just went barreling through that door and destroyed it. Well, my dad heard it. He was sitting in his chair reading a book, and I had to go in and explain it to him. And he just looked at me and said, "You came out and looked at it," and he didn't yell at me that time. But he just went back in the house and said, "You are awfully blah, 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 expensive." And so I am. I'm still expensive. But Tan told me that when his dad, like when my dad yelled at me, the way for me to show defiance was to look away from him. That's how I showed my dad defiance, by looking away. Well, meanwhile, Tan, when his dad yelled at him in a Vietnamese family, again, it's flipped. It's exactly the opposite. The way for him to show defiance was to look at his dad. He was supposed to look away in deference, and culture just fascinates me. And I'll put a head to this in a minute if you just stick with me. Meanwhile, I could take this a while. We have a Bantu rhetorical pattern. We have a Semitic rhetorical pattern that I won't go into today that's characterized by parallel structures. If you're from Saudi Arabia or Yemen or Iraq, they think in these long parallel structures, and that's how they create their sentences. But I'm only going to cover one more aspect of this today. And this is very important because we have a lot of people in Minnesota, increasingly. Go to Long Prairie, Minnesota if you doubt this. We have all kinds of wonderful people migrating to our state whose consciousness is wired with Spanish. And if you think in Spanish, this is what, believe it or not, what the pattern looks like. I saw this in a book. I'm just kind of stealing it. If Spanish rhetoric is characterized by digression. They jump all over the place. And I saw this in particular at my old high school because I had a lot of students there from Mexico. And I can tell you from vast experience, if you tell a young man or woman from Mexico to write one paper, they're going to write you three. Because ideas just keep popping up. It's just something in their culture, and maybe something Spanish does to you. And I think this, at Long Prairie Gray Eagle last year, I had a student, Staples Motley. I had a student whose brother I taught years ago, and we're getting to be good friends, Rafael Cadillo. When I showed him that diagram and talked about the idea of digressing, finding a new topic every paragraph, he smiled. He was always hiding his smile from me. And I remember where it got the most dramatic. I had a student a number of years ago at St. Ben's. I was teaching kind of an extracurricular class for St. John's and St. Ben's in the first year symposium program. I had a young man in that class from Los Angeles, a little bit of a gangster. I think he was up to some stuff he shouldn't be, and I hope he's okay right now. He's the only student I allowed to wear sunglasses in a class because he needed them. He had these wraparound Palermos. Generally, that's not all right with me because I want to look people in the eye. And plus, you never know when students are sleeping. But and it's more dramatic when you do it on a blackboard or a whiteboard. when you draw the sketchy thing and go crazy to explain the digression. He laughed out loud. He just burst out laughing. He doubled over a little bit. And I said, Juan, why do you guys do this? All he said was, I don't know, man, but it's true. And how lonesome I am for him. How lonesome I am for every single student I've ever served. That's what's heaven for. Heaven is for. I'll just wait to get there. I think I'm going to give you, instead of one longer video this week, because I'm trying to drive up my likes. That's not true. I'm not trying to be a YouTuber. I think I'll come to the conclusion right here, and I'll get you another 20-minute video tomorrow in the wind or so. And that's going to be all about a style demonstration. I don't know if it's something to look forward to, but I'll tell you something real true about English teachers. It's a pretty, I'm not saying I'm special or rare. I'll put it this way. It isn't often that English teachers share their writing in English classes. And I'm going to do that tomorrow. And I'm going to do it in Staples tomorrow too. You know why? Because we're nervous too. It's kind of a personal thing, showing somebody your pros. You never know when a student's going to get all judgy. But I'm previewing something I probably can preview tomorrow. I know the weather's not as heavy up in the Brainerd Lakes region where many of you are, but still be careful. There really is quite a wind. And I won't be, my wife and I don't think are going to be going anywhere tomorrow because we're going to be getting over 15 inches of snow in addition to what we already have on the ground. And I know my farmer, Marvin Niehaus, is going to plow me out. So, love you guys. Hope you're well. Keep your eye on D2L, and I'll get you one more video for the week. Stay safe and warm.